The courtroom smelled like floor wax and old coffee. I noticed that before anything else, not the flag standing stiff in the corners, not the fluorescent lights humming overhead, not even the way my brother sat 3 rows behind the opposing table like he belonged there. The smell hit me first because it reminded me of every government building I'd ever walked into since I was 22 years old and too stubborn to quit. My name is Audrey Beckett. I'm a nurse practitioner with the Department of Veterans Affairs. And 2 weeks ago, my older sister filed a formal complaint with the VA Office of Inspector General claiming I had been falsifying patient treatment records for over 3 years. She said I fabricated dosage logs. She said I altered appointment histories. She said I inflated my caseload numbers to secure a promotion I didn't deserve. She said all of this in a 7-page document that she printed on her firm's letterhead because she wanted it to look official. And she brought our mother along as a corroborating witness. Let me be very clear about something before this goes any further. I have never altered a single record. Not one. Not once. Not ever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I should start with the hearing room. It was smaller than I expected. A long table at the front, 3 review panel members seated behind it, a clerk to the side with a laptop and a stack of folders that could have held a small library. The lead investigator was a man named Harold Pratt. Gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of face that had stopped reacting to surprises sometime around 1997. He looked like he'd heard every lie ever told in a government building and had decided long ago that the truth was simpler and less interesting than people made it. My sister, Diane, sat at a separate table to the left. She wore a charcoal suit and her hair pulled back tight the way she always did when she wanted to look serious. She had a leather portfolio open in front of her, and a pen she kept clicking, not nervously, rhythmically, like she was keeping time for something only she could hear. Our mother sat behind her in the gallery, hands in her lap, eyes forward. She didn't look at me when I walked in. She hadn't looked at me in 3 weeks. Pratt opened the session the way these things always open. Dry, procedural, like reading a recipe for something nobody wants to eat. He confirmed identities. He confirmed the nature of the complaint. He confirmed that I had been notified and was present voluntarily without legal counsel. That part made Diane shift in her seat. She hadn't expected me to show up alone. "Miss Holloway," Pratt said, looking at Diane. She'd kept our mother's maiden name after college because she thought Beckett sounded too plain for a compliance attorney. "You may present your complaint." Diane stood. She didn't need to. Nobody asked her to. But Diane always stood when she wanted people to pay attention. "Thank you, Mr. Pratt," she said. Her voice was polished, rehearsed, the kind of voice that wins arguments in boardrooms because it sounds reasonable even when it isn't. "I'm here because I have evidence that my sister, Audrey Beckett, has been systematically falsifying patient records within the VA healthcare system for approximately 3 years. She paused, not for effect, for confirmation. She wanted to see the panel react. One member wrote something down. Another adjusted his glasses. Pratt did nothing. Diane continued. She talked about access logs. She talked about timestamps that didn't align. She talked about a patient volume report that showed my numbers significantly higher than other practitioners in the same department during the same quarter. She talked about a dosage entry for a patient she claimed didn't exist. She presented everything with the precision of someone who believed the weight of her presentation would compensate for what it lacked in depth. When she finished, she placed her documents in front of the clerk. Tabbed, color-coded. She sat down and folded her hands. Pratt looked at me. "Miss Beckett, would you like to respond?" Everyone leaned forward, just slightly, just enough. "No, sir," I said. The room didn't gasp. That only happens in movies. But the silence got thicker. Diane's pen stopped clicking. Pratt studied me for a moment. "You're choosing not to respond at this time?" "Yes, sir." He nodded and turned to the clerk. "Pull the primary patient records for the time frame cited in the complaint." The clerk's fingers moved across the keyboard. Diane watched the screen with narrowed eyes. Here's what Diane didn't know. She didn't know because she'd never worked inside a VA facility. She'd never logged into the record system. She'd never sat through the mandatory training on documentation standards. She didn't know that the system she'd pulled her numbers from was a secondary reporting dashboard, a summary tool. It was designed for administrative oversight, not clinical verification. It compressed entries. It aggregated timelines. It rounded numbers. The actual records lived somewhere else entirely. In a primary database that required credentialed access, that logged every keystroke, every edit, every timestamp down to the second. That system didn't summarize. It remembered. Pratt opened the first file. The room got quiet in a different way. Not tense. Focused. Like everyone understood that what happened next would determine whether this was a hearing or a waste of time. He read for a full minute without speaking. Then he scrolled. Then he stopped. "Miss Holloway," he said without looking up. "Your complaint cites a dosage discrepancy on March 14th. "Yes," Diane said quickly. "The log shows a medication entry that doesn't match the patient's chart." Pratt turned the screen slightly toward the panel. The primary record shows a corrected entry on the same date, initiated by a supervising physician, co-signed by the pharmacy. Diane blinked. "That correction doesn't appear in the dashboard." "Because the dashboard doesn't track corrections," Pratt said. "It tracks submissions." Diane opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked down at her papers and flipped a page. I sat still, hands on the table, breathing steady. "When I was 23, I almost quit nursing. Not because I didn't love it, but because my family didn't understand it. Diane was already in law school by then, and our mother had decided that success looked like a briefcase and a corner office. When I told them I was going into VA healthcare, my mother asked me why I wanted to work with broken people. She didn't mean it cruelly. She meant it the way she always meant things. Practically, efficiently, without imagination." Diane had laughed. She'd said I was choosing the hardest possible path for the smallest possible paycheck. She wasn't wrong about the paycheck. But she was wrong about everything else. I chose the VA because I'd watched my grandfather deteriorate in a system that lost his records twice, misfiled his medication once, and never once apologized. He died in a facility that smelled like that same floor wax, and the last thing he said to me was, "Don't let them forget us, Audrey." I didn't. Every record I ever filed was checked twice. Every dosage log was cross-referenced with pharmacy confirmations. Every patient note was timestamped, initialed, and backed up. Not because I was paranoid. Because I'd seen what happened when someone wasn't careful. Pratt scrolled to the next entry. "Your complaint also flags patient volume," he said. "You claim Miss Beckett's numbers were inflated beyond departmental norms." Diane nodded. "Significantly higher. It suggests either fabrication or misreporting." Pratt pulled up a comparison chart. "These numbers include telehealth follow-ups," he said, "which were added to the reporting structure 18 months ago." Diane frowned. "Telehealth wasn't part of the original scope. It was added during the staffing shortage," Pratt replied. "All practitioners were authorized to expand their panels," the clerk confirmed. "Authorization memo dated 14 months ago. Signed by the regional director." Diane's jaw tightened. "I wasn't aware of that change." Pratt looked at her. "It's a policy update. It wouldn't appear in the summary dashboard." The pattern was forming, not the pattern Diane had presented. A different one. One that showed the distance between what she could see and what actually existed. Pratt moved methodically through each point in Diane's complaint. The timestamps that didn't align. Explained by a system migration that shifted display formats without altering source data. The patient she claimed didn't exist. Existed. Had been transferred between clinics, which created a gap in the summary but not in the primary record. The caseload numbers. Accurate. Documented. Approved. Each answer came from the system itself. Not from me. Not from my words. From records that had been sitting there the entire time, waiting for someone to actually read them. Diane's posture changed gradually. She didn't collapse. She compressed. Her shoulders drew inward. Her pen stayed still. She stopped flipping pages because there were no more pages that could help her. Pratt removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Miss Holloway," he said, "your complaint references a corroborating statement from your mother." "Yes," Diane said. "She reviewed the materials with me." Pratt nodded once. "Did she have independent access to the records?" "She saw what I showed her." "What you showed her," Pratt repeated. "From the summary dashboard." Diane hesitated. "Yes." Pratt leaned back. "So she corroborated your interpretation, not the underlying data." The silence that followed was heavy enough to sit in. My mother shifted in her seat behind Diane. I could hear the fabric of her jacket rustling. She didn't speak. She wasn't allowed to, but I felt her discomfort radiating across the room like heat from an engine. "Let me tell you something about my mother. She's not a bad person. She's a loyal person. And her loyalty runs in a straight line from whoever speaks first and loudest. Diane has always been that person. When we were kids, Diane would come home with a version of events so polished and confident that questioning it felt like questioning gravity. I learned early that my mother didn't choose sides, she chose certainty, and Diane always sounded more certain than me. So when Diane showed her a dashboard full of numbers that looked wrong, my mother didn't ask where the numbers came from. She didn't ask what they measured. She didn't ask if there was another source. She signed the statement because Diane asked her to, and because Diane had never been wrong before. Except she was wrong now. Pratt turned to me. Miss Beckett, were you ever instructed to alter a patient record? No, sir. Have you ever submitted a record you knew to be inaccurate? No, sir. Were you aware of your sister's complaint before receiving official notification? I paused. Not of the complaint itself, but I knew something was coming. Pratt raised an eyebrow. Explain. 3 months ago, my sister called me, I said. She asked about my caseload. She asked how the reporting system worked. She asked if I had access to override entries. Diane stiffened visibly. I told her the system logs everything. I continued. I told her overrides require supervisor approval and leave an audit trail. She didn't ask any more questions after that. Pratt looked at Diane. Is that accurate? She paused too long. I don't recall the specifics of that conversation. Pratt nodded slowly. He made a note. The clerk spoke up. Sir, I've completed the cross-reference. All primary entries are internally consistent across the cited time frame. Pratt nodded. Thank you. Diane leaned forward. This doesn't explain why the summary dashboard shows discrepancies. It does, Pratt said. The dashboard wasn't designed for clinical verification. You used an administrative tool to make a clinical accusation. She shook her head. The tool is used across federal agencies for compliance monitoring. For monitoring, he agreed. Not for adjudication. The distinction was quiet, precise, and devastating. Diane sat back. Her hands were flat on the table now, fingers spread like she was trying to hold something in place. Mr. Pratt, she said carefully, I want to be clear that I brought this complaint in good faith. Good faith requires due diligence, he replied, including verification against primary sources. I didn't have access to primary sources, she said. He looked at her. Then the complaint was premature. The word premature landed like a door closing, not slammed, just shut, firmly, completely. Pratt gathered the documents in front of him and separated them into 2 groups. He slid the thinner stack toward the clerk and kept the thicker one. At this point, he said, the evidence does not support the allegation of records falsification. Miss Beckett's documentation is consistent, verified, and corroborated by primary sources across the cited time frame. Diane's voice was tight. So you're dismissing it? I'm closing it as unsubstantiated, he said. Based on the record. He paused, then continued. This review also notes concerns regarding the construction of the complaint itself, specifically, reliance on derivative data, absence of primary verification, and the involvement of a family member as a corroborating witness without independent access. Diane's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means, Pratt said, that the complaint process itself will be documented and referred for procedural review. You're investigating me now? I'm documenting methodology, he replied. Standard practice when a complaint fails threshold. Diane looked at our mother, then at me, then back at Pratt. This is retaliatory, she said. It's reciprocal, he answered. The system applies equally. The clerk typed steadily. Status indicators changed on the screen. What had started as an investigation into my work was now a record of how and why that investigation had been initiated. Diane stood, not quickly, slowly, like she was deciding whether to leave or make one more argument. She chose the argument. My sister received a promotion 6 weeks ago, she said. A promotion to a quality oversight role. The same kind of role that reviews compliance processes. Don't you think the timing is relevant? Pratt didn't blink. The timing was already noted, along with the fact that your complaint was filed 12 days after her selection was announced. That's coincidence, Diane said. So is yours, he replied. The junior panel member spoke for the first time. Miss Holloway, did you disclose your familial relationship when you filed the complaint? Diane hesitated. It's stated in the document. Stated, the panel member said. But did you consult an ethics office about the conflict of interest before filing? I didn't consider it a conflict, Diane said. Pratt leaned forward slightly. A sister filing a federal complaint against a sister isn't a conflict? She didn't answer. Pratt nodded. That will be part of the procedural review. Diane picked up her portfolio and closed it. The click of the clasp was the loudest sound in the room. I stood. Pratt looked at me. Miss Beckett, your record will be annotated to reflect this review. No adverse action will be taken. Your current role and selection remain intact. Thank you, sir. He held my gaze for a moment. You handled this appropriately. I know, sir. That was all. No applause. No dramatic vindication. Just a quiet room returning to administrative neutrality. The panel members stood. The clerk gathered files. Pratt left first, already looking at something else on his phone. The system had done what it was built to do, and now it was moving on. I collected my bag from the floor beside my chair. Nothing in it I hadn't brought. Nothing on me that wasn't mine before I walked in. Diane was still standing at her table. Our mother had risen and was moving toward us. Her face carrying that expression I'd seen 100 times. The one that meant she wanted to fix something without understanding what was broken. Audrey, my mother said. Her voice was soft, careful. The voice she used when she knew she'd made a mistake but wasn't ready to say it out loud. I looked at her. We didn't know, she said. We didn't understand how the system worked. You just thought Diane was right, I said. Because Diane is always right. My mother flinched. That's not fair. You signed a sworn statement, I said, accusing me of fraud, without ever asking me, without ever checking. We were worried, she said. You were convinced, I corrected. There's a difference. Diane stepped forward. Don't blame her. I brought her into this. I looked at my sister. Yeah, you did. Diane's expression shifted. Not guilt. Not yet. Something closer to irritation that the outcome hadn't gone her way. I was trying to protect the system, she said. You were trying to control it, I replied, the way you always do. That's not fair, she said. The same words our mother used, the same deflection. You saw my promotion and it bothered you, I said. Not because you thought I cheated. Because you couldn't explain why I succeeded without your help. Diane's jaw clenched. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you called me 3 months ago asking how the system works, I said. I know you pulled numbers from a dashboard you didn't understand. I know you brought Mom in because you needed someone to agree with you. And I know you never once asked me if any of it was true. She stared at me. For a moment, just a moment, the mask slipped. Underneath was something old. Something that had been sitting between us since we were kids sharing a bedroom and competing for the same approval from a mother who only had enough attention for one version of success. You always had to be the smart one, I said. I just had to be the careful one. Diane blinked. Then her expression hardened again. You'll regret cutting us out. I'm not cutting you out, I said. I'm walking away from a situation where my own family tried to end my career based on a spreadsheet. My mother reached for my arm. Audrey, please. We can talk about this. I stepped back, gently. Not dramatically. Just enough to make the boundary clear. There's nothing to talk about, I said. You chose to believe her without asking me. That's the part that matters. My mother's eyes filled. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Behind her, Diane gathered her things with stiff, mechanical movements. The portfolio, the pen, the confidence she'd carried in like armor, now dented in places she couldn't see yet. I turned toward the door. Nobody stopped me. The hallway was long and quiet. Government beige walls, linoleum floors, the hum of air conditioning working too hard for a building this old. I walked slowly, not because I was tired, because I didn't need to rush. The thing about being cleared is that urgency disappears. There's no deadline anymore. No accusation hanging over your head, just the next step, and the step after that. My phone buzzed. A message from my supervisor. Short, direct, review concluded. Welcome back. Briefing at 0900 tomorrow. I typed 2 words. Copy. Thanks. And put the phone away. Outside, the parking lot was half empty. Late afternoon sun cutting across the asphalt at a low angle. I unlocked my car, set my bag on the passenger seat, and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. I thought about my grandfather. About the last time I visited him in that VA facility with the floor wax smell and the fluorescent lights. He'd been lucid that day, which was rare near the end. He'd looked at me with those sharp, tired eyes and said, "They lose things in here, Audrey. Papers, names, people." I'd held his hand and promised I wouldn't let that happen. And he hadn't. Every record I'd ever touched was clean. Every patient I'd ever documented was real. Every number in my file was earned the hard way, through late shifts and double checks and the kind of quiet work that nobody notices until someone tries to say it doesn't exist. Diane had tried. The system had answered. I started the car. The engine caught on the first turn. I pulled out of the lot, turned left onto the main road, and drove toward home without looking back. There was work waiting. There always is when you do it right.